Wesley Owens balanced his 4-year-old daughter on one hip and a tray of lukewarm coffee and one sad-looking muffin in his other hand, his eyes scanning the packed cafe like a man stranded at sea searching for land. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Florence whispered, tugging on his hoodie sleeve. "I know, baby girl. We just need a place to sit," he said, his voice steady even though his insides were knotted with stress. It was one of those cold New York mornings where the wind sliced through your coat, and dealing with a tantrum-prone toddler in public felt like an Olympic sport. Wesley had dropped Florence off at daycare, only to be called an hour later because she had a fever. He had no choice but to leave work again. And now, having just gotten her some food and a bit of juice, he needed 5 minutes to sit down before the guilt swallowed him whole. But every single table was taken, except one. A woman walked through the door just as he spotted a couple standing to leave. She wore a tailored navy coat, heels that clicked decisively on the tile, and carried herself like she owned the world. Her dark hair was pinned up in a sleek twist, and her gaze locked on the same table he was heading for. They reached it at the same time. Wesley looked at her, then at Florence, who was rubbing her eyes and resting her cheek against his shoulder. "You can take it," he said quickly, stepping aside and setting the tray on the edge of the table. "She's not feeling great. I'll figure it out." The woman blinked, surprised. "Are you sure? You were here first." "Doesn't matter," he said with a small shrug. "Your shoes probably cost more than my car." "You should sit down." She laughed a real laugh, not the polite kind. "That's bold." Wesley gave her a tired grin. "I'm on 4 hours of sleep and 2 days past a paycheck. Bold is all I've got." Her eyes softened. "Sit with me. There's room." "I don't want to." She was already moving her laptop bag to the floor. "If your daughter's sick, she shouldn't be standing around." "Okay," he said, lowering Florence into a chair. "Thanks. I'm Wren," she said as she pulled off her coat, revealing a crisp white blouse and a slim fit-well skirt. "Wesley. And this is Florence." Florence looked up and gave a shy wave. "Hi." Wren smiled. "Hi, sweetheart." Wesley handed his daughter the muffin and juice, then took a sip of the burnt coffee. He didn't realize how quiet Wren was watching him until she spoke again. "You seem tired." He chuckled. "That obvious, huh?" "You're doing great," she said gently. He looked up, taken aback by the sincerity in her voice. "Thanks." Wren glanced at her watch, then closed her laptop. "Do you work nearby?" "I did," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Used to manage inventory at a warehouse in Queens. Got laid off 6 months ago. I'm picking up odd jobs, deliveries, handyman stuff, whatever I can get. It's been rough." She nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "And your daughter?" "Her mom passed away 2 years ago. Cancer." Wren's hand froze around her coffee cup. "I'm so sorry." "Yeah," he said softly. "Me too." There was a pause after that. Not awkward, just full. Florence had dozed off in the chair beside them, her head tilted to the side. Wren leaned in slightly. "She's beautiful. She's everything." Wren hesitated, then opened her purse and pulled out a business card. "Wesley, I know this is going to sound strange, but I'm hiring." He furrowed his brow. "Hiring? For what?" "I'm the CEO of Asterisk Group. We're a mid-sized tech firm based about 10 blocks from here. I need a facilities coordinator, someone who can handle logistics, manage vendors, oversee maintenance. It's not glamorous, but it pays well and comes with full benefits." Wesley stared at the card like it might explode. "You're serious?" "I don't hand my business card to strangers on the street," she said, smiling. "But I trust my gut. And my gut says you're capable, you care about your daughter, and you need a break." He looked from her to the card to Florence. "I need flexibility," he said finally. "If she gets sick or we're family-friendly. We have on-site childcare too." He swallowed. "Come in Monday. Let's talk." Wesley walked home that day with Florence's head resting against his coat, the card burning a hole in his pocket. He hadn't believed in luck in a long time. But something about Wren, her kindness, her presence, her calm confidence made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely invisible to the universe. Monday came faster than expected. Wesley wore his only clean button-up shirt and dropped Florence off with the on-site childcare Wren mentioned. The receptionist greeted him like he belonged there. And when Wren stepped out of the elevator in a tailored emerald green dress, navy, definitely navy, he felt the air shift. She walked straight up to him, her heels echoing in the marble lobby. "You came," she said with a smile that made his chest feel too tight. "I said I would." Good, she said. Let's see what we can build together. He didn't know yet that she meant more than just business. But he was about to find out. By the end of his second week at Asterisk Group, Wesley had memorized every inch of the 20-story building. He knew which elevators stuck on floor 11, which windows whistled when the wind picked up, and which vendors always tried to cut corners when dropping off supplies. He liked the rhythm of the job, predictable, physical, honest. But what he hadn't figured out yet was Wren. She was a contradiction in motion. Some days, she'd pass him in the hallway with a brisk nod, her focus razor-sharp, her phone glued to her ear. Other days, she'd pause during his walk-throughs to ask oddly personal questions about Florence's favorite books, or the best way to fix a leaky faucet without shutting off the main line. Once, she caught him balancing a ladder on a loose tile near reception and made him promise to send a request for a full floor replacement before someone got hurt. Efficiency is good, she'd said, but not if it lands someone in the ER. Today, he was halfway through replacing a broken light fixture in the executive conference room when her voice floated in behind him. You're not afraid of heights? Wesley looked down from the ladder, his wrench in hand. I'm afraid of a lot of things. Heights just aren't on the list. She stepped inside, setting a folder on the table. What is? He hesitated, then tightened the last bolt. Failing at something that matters. When he climbed down, she was leaning against the table, arms crossed, watching him like she hadn't expected him to answer. That's not a bad fear, she said after a beat. You? Wren tilted her head, losing control. They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that felt deliberate. Then she cleared her throat. There's a networking gala downtown Friday. Asterisk sponsors it every year. I'd like you to come. Wesley blinked. Me? You're part of the team now. I fix things and schedule pest control. That doesn't exactly scream black tie event. She smiled faintly. You represent the company the moment you walk in the door. I want the people in that room to know we value every level of our staff. He studied her face, trying to read between the lines. I don't own anything fancier than a button-up shirt. Then we'll fix that. I don't need a handout. It's not, she said. It's a company expense. Technically. Wesley shook his head with a laugh. Technically, you're rewriting the rules. I'm the CEO. I write whatever rules I want. He stared at her for a second longer than necessary, then gave a slow nod. Fine, but I'm not wearing a bow tie. The next day, a garment bag appeared in his office. Inside was a tailored charcoal suit, a pale blue shirt, and a pair of Italian leather dress shoes that felt like they belonged in another man's life. There was no note, no receipt, just his name on the tag. Florence squealed when he tried it on that night. You look like a prince, she said, tugging at the lapels. He kissed the top of her head. Don't tell anyone, but I still have no idea what I'm doing. Then pretend you do, she said solemnly. That's what princesses do all the time. Friday came fast. The gala was held in the chandelier-studded ballroom of the Langford Hotel, one of those old money places with velvet drapes and ceilings that looked like they belonged in a cathedral. Wesley stepped inside and immediately felt like he was made of drywall and duct tape. Everyone glided across the polished floors like they'd been born in tuxedos. Then he saw her. Wren stood near the bar, talking to a man with salt and pepper hair and a champagne flute in hand. Her dress was black satin, cut clean and sharp, with a slit that suggested danger and elegance in equal measure. Her hair was down, soft waves brushing her collarbone. She looked like she belonged there. More than that, like she owned the room. The moment her eyes met his, the conversation around her faded. She excused herself politely and walked toward him, her heels silent on the marble floor. You clean up well, she said. You make it impossible not to feel underdressed. I thought you said no bow tie? Turns out Florence has opinions. She smiled, something warm settling in her expression. Smart kid. They found themselves near the balcony, away from the cluster of venture capitalists and startup founders. She leaned against the railing, looking out at the city lights. You know, she said, when I started Asterisk, I was 26 and convinced I could outwork the entire planet. I slept in the office for 6 months. Wesley glanced at her. What changed? I realized no one wins alone. He let that sit for a beat. Is that why you hired me? No, she said. I hired you because my instincts told me you were the right choice. But I kept you because I was right. He wasn't sure what to say to that. So he didn't. After a moment, she turned to face him fully. Do you ever miss the version of your life before everything changed? He looked out at the skyline. Sometimes. But then Florence does something like draw a smiley face on my lunch napkin and suddenly, I don't. Wren's gaze softened. You don't let people see that often, do you? What? The part of you that still hopes. He met her eyes. Hope's dangerous. So is falling. There was something about the way she said it, quiet, firm, like she wasn't just talking about accidents. Before he could respond, a man in a crisp navy suit approached, extending a hand toward Wren. Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Langford. They're asking for you back inside. She nodded, then looked at Wesley. Don't disappear. I won't. As she walked away, he felt something stir in his chest. Not nerves. Not awe. Recognition. She wasn't just a CEO. She was a storm wrapped in silk. And he was already standing in the rain. Wesley lingered in the doorway of the office kitchen, watching the steam rise from the cup of tea he'd just made. The building was quieter than usual. Late afternoon had melted into early evening, and most of the staff had already left. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from the on-site childcare team. Florence had fallen asleep watching a puppet show and could stay until closing if needed. He exhaled slowly, grateful she was cared for, but his mind was elsewhere. He hadn't seen Wren since the gala. Not really. There had been brief nods in the hallway, a passing comment about the new service contract for the elevators, a clipped "thank you" when he fixed the espresso machine in the executive lounge. But nothing close to the way she'd looked at him that night on the balcony, like he was more than just another name on her payroll. He wasn't sure if he'd dreamed it, or worse, imagined it. Just as he turned to leave, her voice came from the corridor. Do you have a minute? She stood there, arms loose at her sides, her jacket barely shrugged on over a fitted blouse he hadn't seen before. Her hair was wind-tousled, less perfect than usual. He nodded. Yeah, sure. She stepped into the kitchen and glanced at the tea in his hand. Chamomile. It keeps me from drinking a sixth coffee. Smart, she said, then leaned against the counter beside him. I've been meaning to talk to you. He arched a brow. That sounds ominous. It's not. She paused, then met his eyes. Do you like working here? The question caught him off guard. I do. More than I expected to. Why? I feel useful, he said simply. I solve problems. People ask for my help without sounding like they're doing me a favor. She nodded slowly, then looked down at her hands. I've been thinking about expanding your role. Expanding it how? Not just facilities. Operations. Logistics oversight. I'd want you more involved in the day-to-day mechanics of the company, vendor negotiations, budget reviews, team coordination. You already handle half of it unofficially. He rubbed the back of his neck. That's a big step. It comes with a higher salary. And a title. Wesley looked at her carefully. Why me? Because you're already doing the work. You see the details no one else notices. And, frankly, I trust you. He hesitated. That's not nothing. It's not, she said. And I don't give it lightly. There was a pause, long enough for the hum of the refrigerator to fill it. Then she added, I also wanted to apologize. For what? For giving you the suit without asking. I should have handled that differently. He shook his head. You gave me a chance to show up in a room I never thought I'd be allowed into. That's not something I'll ever complain about. Wren studied him. I've spent years surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear. You don't do that. I don't know how. Good. Don't learn. They stood in silence again, this time more comfortable. Then she pushed off the counter. I have a dinner meeting in 30 minutes, but I'd like to go over the transition plan tomorrow if you're open to the promotion. I'm open, he said. Great. She started to leave, then hesitated at the door. One more thing. Yeah. I don't usually let anyone in. Not really. But the night of the gala, I didn't feel like I had to keep anything up. Wesley met her gaze, steady. You didn't. She gave a small nod, then left. That night, long after Florence was tucked in and the apartment had gone quiet, Wesley sat at the kitchen table, staring at the offer letter she'd emailed. It was real. The salary alone would mean a different life. Rent paid on time. Better groceries. A savings account. But that wasn't what made his chest tighten. It was the way she'd looked at him. Like he wasn't just surviving, he was seen. The next day, he arrived early, dressed in the same clothes he'd worn for years, but holding himself differently. Wren was already in the conference room, flipping through notes. She looked up as he stepped inside. I brought coffee, he said, placing a cup in front of her. She blinked. You knew my order? You mentioned it once. Last week, when the machine broke. She smiled, slow and surprised. You listen. I always listen. She set the papers aside. Let's begin. The meeting lasted an hour, filled with numbers and goals and project outlines. But beneath the surface, something else was moving, something they didn't speak aloud, yet both of them felt. Afterward, as she gathered her things, she hesitated. Are you doing anything tonight? He looked up. Depends. There's a private exhibit opening at the Whitmore Gallery. I have 2 passes. Thought you might want to come. To an art show? To something that isn't work, she said, watching him. No expectations. Just a night out. He considered it. What about Florence? I booked a nanny through the same service we use at the office. Fully vetted. You booked a nanny before asking me? I had a feeling you'd say yes. He laughed under his breath. You're bold. So are you, she said. That's why this works. He didn't answer right away. Then, pickup time. 7. He nodded. I'll be ready. That evening, as he stood outside the gallery, dressed in the suit he'd sworn he wouldn't wear again, he saw her cross the street. She wasn't in heels this time. Just simple black boots and a deep burgundy coat belted at the waist. Her hair was down again, but not styled, just windblown and real. You clean up well, he said. That makes us even. Inside, the gallery was hushed and warm, filled with soft lighting and abstract forms. But Wesley barely noticed the art. She walked beside him, asking his opinion on pieces, laughing at his dry commentary, brushing his arm when she pointed at a sculpture. They shared a quiet bench near the end of the exhibit, sipping wine and talking about things that had nothing to do with work or responsibilities. Wren turned to him, her voice quieter now. Do you ever think about what you want 5 years from now? He met her gaze. I used to. Then everything fell apart, and I stopped thinking that far ahead. Maybe it's time to start again. His fingers brushed hers, tentative but sure. Maybe it is. The first time Wesley kissed Wren, it wasn't planned. They were standing on the rooftop of the Asterisk building after office hours. The city stretched out below them in quiet gold and steel. She had asked him up there under the pretense of showing him the new solar panel installation, but neither of them had said a word about it since stepping into the cool evening air. He didn't ask for permission. He just folded the space between them with a certainty that had been building for weeks, his hand at the side of her neck, her breath catching against his mouth. When they pulled apart, her voice was low. I've been waiting for that. I know, he said, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. After that night, everything shifted. Morning started earlier. He'd bring her coffee before the team meetings, and she'd glance up from her laptop with something soft in her eyes. They were careful at work, but not distant. At night, he'd pick Florence up, read to her until she fell asleep, then meet Wren for takeout on her balcony or long walks through the quieter corners of the city. Florence adored her instantly. Wren never tried too hard, she didn't push or pry, but she listened when Florence talked about her imaginary raccoon friend or what color stars should be. One evening, Wesley came back from the kitchen to find them curled up on the couch, Wren braiding tiny sections of Florence's hair while she explained the plot of her favorite picture book with wild hand motions. He stood there for a moment, watching them, something tight and unfamiliar coiling in his chest. Later that night, he asked quietly, You okay with this? With her? Wren didn't flinch. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. Still, things weren't simple. Asterisk was preparing for a high-profile acquisition, an aggressive move that would double their size and catapult them into global relevance. Wren was under constant scrutiny from investors, press, and competitors. She worked late. She traveled often. And with every new headline, the pressure mounted. One Tuesday morning, after a board meeting that ran 2 hours too long, she found Wesley in the loading bay overseeing a delivery. His sleeves were rolled up, clipboard in hand, a pencil behind his ear. She waited until he was done before walking over. You've got a minute? For you, always. She didn't smile. I got word today the press found out about us. His expression didn't change. And they want to run a story. Not about the company. About us. About me, the tech mogul, and her maintenance man. Let them. She blinked. It could hurt the deal. Investors might see it as reckless. Then I'll step back, he said simply. If this puts your company at risk, I'll walk away. No, she said instantly. Don't say that. I'm not ashamed of who I am, Wren. But I won't be a reason you lose everything you fought for. Her hands curled at her sides. You're not a liability, Wesley. You're the only person in my life who doesn't want anything from me. I want you, he said. That's everything. She stepped closer, her voice shaking slightly. Then let's face it together. He nodded. Okay. The article ran the next day. It was worse than expected. The photo was from the gala. Wren in her black dress, Wesley standing beside her, and the headline was a thinly veiled mockery of their difference in status. The story painted her as impulsive, him as a curiosity. Wren was in back-to-back meetings when it dropped. Wesley took Florence to the park, shielding her from the whispers already starting in the grocery line and the stares in the coffee shop. But by evening, everything changed. Wren called him. "Turn on the television," she said. He did. Wren stood behind a podium at a press conference, flanked by her legal team and board members. She wasn't smiling. Her voice was calm and absolute. "Yes, I'm in a relationship with Wesley Owens. He's not a maintenance man. He's a father, a veteran, and a brilliant operational strategist who has improved our company's efficiency in 3 months more than 6 consultants managed in a year. He earned his promotion. He earned his place. And he earned my respect. Not because of his background. Because of his character." She paused, her eyes steady. "And if choosing someone honest, kind, and incredibly capable disqualifies me from leadership in your eyes, then you never believed in leadership at all." The room fell silent. Wesley's hand tightened around the back of the couch as Florence looked up at him. "Is she talking about you?" He nodded. "Yeah, baby. She is." The fallout was swift and not what anyone expected. The next morning, the Asterisk investor line was flooded with support. Clients praised her integrity. Employees sent flowers. The board unanimously backed her. And the acquisition? It went through. Stronger than projected. That Friday, Wren walked into Wesley's apartment with a bottle of champagne, a small velvet box in her coat pocket, and a look in her eyes he hadn't seen before. He was making dinner. Florence was at her cousin's for the weekend, and when he turned around, she stepped into his space, held out the box, and said, "Before you panic, it's not what you think." He opened it. Inside was a key. To her place. "I want you there. I want Florence there. I want us there." He reached for her hand. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He kissed her slowly, the kind of kiss not born from urgency, but from trust. The kind of kiss that meant everything was changing and nothing would be lost in the shift. 6 months later, Wesley stood beside Wren beneath a canopy of lights on a rooftop filled with people who'd once doubted them. Florence tossed flower petals from a little satin basket, wearing a crown she'd made herself out of felt and glitter. The officiant barely finished the final words before Wren pulled him into a kiss that left no room for doubt. They didn't need a fairy tale. They had something better. They had each other. Fully. Honestly. Completely. And for the first time in a long time, Wesley Owens believed in forever. Wesley stepped back from the mirror, adjusting the cuff of his shirt as Florence skipped into the bedroom, her sparkly shoes clacking against the hardwood floor. "Do I look like a flower again?" she asked, spinning in her pale yellow dress, the one Wren had surprised her with a week ago. "You said I looked like a flower." "You look better than a flower," he said, kneeling to fix the bow on her sash. "You look like sunshine." She beamed and leaned forward to hug him, her arms wrapping tightly around his neck. "Wren's gonna love it," she whispered. He smiled, hugging her back. "She already does." Downstairs, soft jazz filtered through the open windows of their new home, one Wren had bought, but insisted they make into something shared. The house had a wraparound porch, a backyard with a crooked tree Florence had claimed as her reading spot, and a kitchen large enough for Sunday pancake experiments that usually ended in chaos and syrup on the ceiling. Tonight was different. Tonight wasn't about boardrooms or headlines or whispered opinions. Tonight was about them. Wesley picked Florence up, carried her down the stairs, and stepped out onto the back patio where lanterns hung from the trees and soft golden lights laced the railings. Their closest friends and a few of Wren's trusted colleagues were scattered in small clusters, sipping wine and laughing over cheese boards. There was no photographer, no press, just warmth and celebration. Wren stood near the garden in a dress the color of deep rose petals, her hair twisted and pinned with delicate gold combs. She was talking to one of Florence's weekend teachers, her hand resting lightly on the woman's arm, her expression open and animated. Wesley watched her for a moment, the way she moved with equal parts grace and purpose. Florence leaned in. "You should go kiss her." He chuckled. "You think?" "Uh-huh. That's what people do when they're in love." He kissed her cheek. "Glad you're keeping me on track." Wren spotted them then and excused herself, walking across the lawn barefoot, her heels forgotten somewhere near the herb garden. She stopped in front of him, her eyes searching his face for something unspoken. "You're late," she said softly. I got held up by a very insistent flower girl. Wren reached out, brushing his jaw with her fingertips. You always know how to make an entrance. He dipped his head and kissed her gently, the kind of kiss that didn't need to prove anything. Florence tugged at Wren's hand. Can I show them the dance? Wren laughed, her gaze flicking to Wesley. The dance. She's been rehearsing something with the neighbor's twins, he said. All I know is that it involves scarves and a lot of spinning. Oh, then absolutely, Wren said, letting Florence pull her toward the makeshift stage area near the garden. Wesley followed, watching as 3 children took their places and began a chaotic but enthusiastic routine that involved ribbons, twirls, and one very dramatic tumble into the grass. The crowd clapped wildly, and one of the twins took a bow so deep his glasses nearly slid off. Later, after the guests had trickled out and Florence had fallen asleep on a pile of cushions in the living room, Wesley found Wren sitting on the porch steps with her heels beside her and a glass of wine in hand. He joined her, letting their shoulders touch in the quiet. You did all this, he said. So did you, she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat like that for a while, the hum of summer insects filling the spaces between their breaths. I used to think loving someone meant sacrificing parts of yourself, she said eventually. Giving up things to make space. He turned slightly so he could see her better. And now I know the right person never asks you to give anything up. They build something with you. Something better. Wesley took her hand. I never thought I'd have this again. A home. A family. I thought that part of my life was gone. She looked at him, her expression clear and unwavering. It wasn't gone. It was waiting. The porch light flickered as a breeze passed through the trees. Wren set her glass down and stood, pulling him up with her. I have something for you, she said. He frowned. Wren, tonight was more than enough. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Just read it. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the contents. It was a deed to a small lakefront property upstate. A cabin, modest but sturdy. Trees. Water. Space. He looked up in disbelief. Is this ours? She nodded. A place for weekends. For quiet. For Florence to find frogs and read her stories under the trees. For you to breathe. For us to grow. He didn't speak at first, just wrapped his arms around her and held her tightly. When did you do this? He said into her hair. Last month. You were busy fixing the attic fan. He leaned back, laughing under his breath. Of course I was. She covered his mouth with hers, slow and deep and full of every unspoken vow they no longer needed to say out loud. Later, after they carried Florence to bed and locked the doors, they lay tangled on the couch, the windows open, the city far enough away not to matter. I never imagined my life would look like this, he whispered. Neither did I, she said, tracing his jaw with her thumb. But I wouldn't change a single piece. He kissed her again, this time with the ease of someone who finally understood what it meant to have everything. They didn't need to chase more. They had built something unshakable. A life threaded with laughter, stitched with patience, and anchored in love. And it was only just beginning.